So when you think about what do we do in times when what I want causes pain in a relationship, right? It's not because what I'm wanting is selfish or something that I'm doing wrong, or what do you do with the fact that sometimes we have situations in life where what we want will hurt the person that we love the most because it has an impact on them.
Yeah. Uncomfortableness, anxiety, all the things that come along with things that I might want that you don't. We're talking today about potential. Well, I'll let you.
Well, it seems like most of the time, whenever we run into these situations, most people go quiet. Like we kind of withdraw, we pull back, and we don't let ourselves, be engaged in some of the things we want. And what's interesting is sometimes we do this and we tell ourselves we're just being kind and considerate, but in actuality, it can also start having an impact on both sides of the marital situation pretty dramatically. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we're heading today. Is we're picking up from a few weeks ago where we had a long email from a wife, and we spent the entire episode on her story, on the physical pain, the medical journey, the feeling that her body just didn't work the way she wanted it to. She couldn't find answers in the medical establishment. And even that was really impactful to her on that journey. And so that was the episode of She Knows How to Ride from 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And so today we're going to do the same email, but we're going to use it as shifting to him. We're not going to talk about her. We're going to shift it to him.
Or her view of him.
Correct. Yeah. Well, and that's a good distinction because we don't have information of him other than what she's given us as her mind and her map of her husband. And so we're going to speak about him in this dilemma through her mind, if you will.
Which is interesting because you think about it. I mean, how many people listen to this show and they are the spouse that listens, right? Mm-hmm. They are the one that listens. Their spouse does not. And if you've been listening for any length of time, you understand that I have a map of my spouse. I think that they act one way, but I might be thinking of spouse 1.0 from 20 years ago and not who they are today, which is spouse 5.0, because life changes us.
Exactly. And so here's just give you some context to catch people up. If you didn't catch the episode from 2 weeks ago, it's She Knows How to Ride. Go back and catch it. But here's the context is her and her husband were approaching a 1-year anniversary. They entered into marriage, talking about all kinds of expectations and what they would hope for. They communicated everything. And then when they got into it, they realized bodies didn't work the way she thought it would. And
hers didn't. She had been a virgin.
Right. Yeah. And he even thought it would. Right. So penetrative sex was too painful to complete. And so that's still true in large part a year later. And so here's the passages I'm just going to pull out of the long email as it pertains to him to help set the stage for our conversation today. So within the first week of marriage, I was shocked to realize that my husband was not into physical intimacy as much as I was, despite our regular discussion and expectations prior to getting married. He would flat out reject me more times than I can count. His excuses ranged from I'm tired to I'm just not in the mood. Although he does have a physically demanding job, it's not what you would expect a 30-year-old newlywed who's been waiting to be with his wife. We've discussed it at great length, how emotionally painful this is for me. And although he feels bad when I point it out, little changed. They've also ruled out possible factors for him, which would have been his porn use and low testosterone. And for her, it's beyond damaging to be rejected time and time again, or to feel like he succumbs to obligatory sex. And then so now neither one of us are in the mood to have sex, and it's just as painful as it was on day one. So we're now in counseling. We've covered a lot of good emotional ground, but the sexual rejection has gotten better. And yet I do not feel like a wife. So again, just to be clear, we're talking about this entirely as her reactions to him. So that's how we're framing the conversation, because every data point matters about how she's framed it, and it gives us a picture that we can build off of. Just so the audience is very, very clear. Okay. Because one of the things that we often hear over the years of Sexy Marriage Radio is we could have gone a lot of different ways, or what about, and then we can fill in the blank of the way other people hear a situation. And that makes a difference on how it lands. right? Because even 2 weeks ago episode lands differently from the different people in the emails we've gotten
Sure.
from that show. And so what's interesting to me is there's two explanations for a man who only shows up reactively in his own marriage. Either there's not much going on inside him, and this is kind of, we framed it 2 weeks ago on what if he is the lower desire and he didn't realize it. And so that's the main dilemma he's facing. Or there's quite a bit going on in him and no one has asked about it directly to get to the heart of what really is this about.
Well, and he may be just trying to figure out and hash it out himself and doesn't really even realize it.
Yeah, he could be totally on his back heels because it's not, it just as much as she is like, what, this is not at all what I thought going in. He could have the exact same level of, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if the first time they're having penetrative sex, it's hurting her, what an event for him.
Most men will really shell up when something like that happens because it is not something, I mean, I've yet to meet a man that is like not aghast about the pain that he causes.
Yeah.
It's a deep thing for him.
Yeah. So you got to think that affects him and he doesn't want to cause this pain for her. So
right. So Pam, let me just ask you a question because this is one of those to frame our conversation. You get to play some of the role today of the feminine experience as it pertains to the masculine man interacting and being present and engaging with you.
Okay.
And so you get to speak as you, but also as the wives that listen. So how does a woman read a husband who turns out to be different than expected, especially when the script says a 30-year-old newlywed should be the one chasing her?
Well, your mind can go all kinds of ways, and it might depend on how confident a woman you are. It might depend on the history that you've had together. I think it's probably pretty common if given their situation, would it not be common for her to think, well, what's wrong with me? Or am I not attractive to him?
Right.
Or is there something else going on in his head? And maybe personalize whatever it is that's not drawing the reaction that you expected. And then when you don't get those reactions, well, what's wrong with us?
Right.
What's wrong between us?
Right.
And maybe personalizing it rather than maybe asking whatever the right questions are. I mean, when you're in the heat of it, do you know the right questions to ask? Do you know? No.
And that's what's so fascinating about us is it seems like we can get these flashbulb moments, which are something that goes totally counter to a script I've got of the way I think it'll go or an expectation. And then sometimes there'll be deviations of it that aren't too severe. But when they're really severe, like this one was, it becomes almost like a flashbulb moment, which is where it gets lodged in your brain differently. And so she wrote this story about him in week 1, on the honeymoon.
Yes.
And now the rest of the year has been spent just collecting more evidence of that script rather than, because we can get so tunnel visioned on something that we don't widen the view to the possibilities of what else could it be? How could I look at this a little differently rather than I'm still taken aback over what went down. And now everything points to that rather than, yes, some of that absolutely does, but some of it also could be what's really going on with him that's not about her in this. And that's the dilemma of trying to figure out how do you separate this out? That's where marriage therapy done well gets that simultaneously happening. I get a chance with the intensives that I do where I get 3 days in a row with a couple and we get to really unpack it of what's happening in both of you simultaneously, not how are you feeding off of each other and what do you need to do to accommodate and address and adjust for them and what does he need to do? It's what's really happening when she has this thought, what do you have going on with you?
Yeah.
And trying to help that energy work.
Well, I hear this scenario, and maybe these don't tie, but in my mind, they tie. Because I feel like I'm kind of in his shoes.
Okay.
Okay. When and we've talked about this before in our relationship, like the week before we got married, you disclosed to me your porn use, right? And I had been so looking forward to our married sexual relationship, super excited about it. And then that comes right before the wedding and we get to the honeymoon and thereafter. And man, I was shut down.
Yes, you were.
I was shut down.
It was a huge impact. Looking back at it, it's very clear to see.
Yeah, shut down for a long time. And so now I realize I really believe that was what did it. And so you think of this couple where they talked beforehand, they were talking about sexual relationship. She thought that he was going to be more high desire. And then they get to the honeymoon and it hurts her.
Mm-hmm.
And he's scared, potentially. I'm reading something into it. But
well, and that's it. Those are legit questions.
Those things can really, when you have this new piece of information, can be a game changer for a period of time. It doesn't mean it's forever.
Right. It is impactful, but it requires us to have the courage to look back at it and make more and make better sense of it, to actually address it, not just try to navigate around it.
Yeah. Well, I only brought ours into it to say within the context of their story that there can be like a one-time event that does change things because it changes his mindset. And
for us, that lasted about 12 years.
For us, it did, but people can figure out how to deal with those things. Mm-hmm. Right. So it doesn't mean that he's a different person.
Right.
But he kind of is because he knows something different now. Right. But it's not that he's totally different or has no desire.
Right. Yeah. And so this is where you have to ask him some better questions that he needs to ask himself in some ways too. Is like, what is it like to be him in this situation?
Yeah.
What's going on inside you? You know, what's happening on, you know, what once you make sense of that, the answers to that question, then you get to ask yourself the bigger question, which is the idea of what are you doing about what you're facing inside you? Because it's not, why aren't you initiating more? Why aren't you doing? It's like, okay, what are you doing about what you're discovering? Because, you know, it's interesting because what do you do when you realized as a husband, I'm trying to think through, if I'm reaching for my wife, if I have these desires, I'm leading towards her and it hurts her. And then I'm living with that. That's a dilemma that's not about her.
Yeah, that's about
She's
him.
a framework that's uncovering a dilemma in me of what do I do with this? What do I do with what I want and how it might hurt? How do I navigate through that? Because he's got scripts too. And so when he uses the phraseologies of I'm tired, I'm just not in the mood, I don't know if those are exactly lies or not. I mean, it's probably the most accurate thing he can think of in his mind. And it's the closest words he's come up with for something that's harder to say if he can figure out what really is going on, because he's found himself in one of two places. And we've talked about this a couple of times already with the last 2 weeks episode and then today, of either he's genuinely the lower desire partner in the marriage, which for some people that totally throws us for a loop, because as a man, you're like, that's hard to fathom and wrap your head around sometimes, when culturally it's like, no way, I'm not supposed to be the lower desire. I'm the one that has all the testosterone. I'm the one that's masculine. I'm the one that, you know, it's like, wait a second, but what if you are? Because that exists.
Yeah, it's
25 to 30% of the marriages I come across, roughly, the wife is the higher desire.
Yeah.
And so either that's where you are, or you are the higher desire partner who's been hiding himself for the sake of his wife.
For the sake of not hurting her physically.
Yeah. Because if I hint around, if I bring it up, I'm leading straight towards pain. And that's not necessarily physical pain. It's also the emotional pain surrounding it. You think of all of the excitement, all the conversations, all the anticipation, and that leads straight towards that. If I hint around, if I flirt, if I'm erotic, if I'm...
Yeah. And what's interesting with that is they've figured out and done other things other than penetrative sex, right? And those, you know, they found some ways, but it's still, if you got that fear of hurting in your head, hurting your spouse.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because if you look at this, it's two people in the same marriage at the same moment, largely giving up versions of themselves because of what happened. It's like we had these hopes, we had these dreams, and now all of a sudden I got to let them go. And so that means I just don't even lean towards it. I don't even bring it up. I don't talk about it anymore. Or if I do, I'm only talking about it with a little bit of a negative tint. The why can't we? Why, those kinds of things, a little more of a powerless stance rather than what do you do where you start to see this as both of them are paying for what went down at the first of their marriage. So now how do you not just treat this as a medical situation with a reluctant husband that's attached to it? What if you treat it's actually as two people who've stopped living fully themselves at around the same time? Because it's a different thing to be able to honestly say, yeah, I'm wrecked from what went down on our honeymoon.
Yeah.
It really threw me for a loop, because the way this often goes in marriages is somebody gets to be the identified one. I'm not saying this is intentional. I'm like, well, you have no idea what it was like for me, to the physical pain and all that. I'm hurting too. And it's like this, we get in these matches of, well, my struggle is more. And typically one that will land on one person more than the other. And in reality, this is what I hinted at early. In reality, this is about how is there room for both of you to handle the dilemma you're in alongside and with each other? Because his dilemma is different than hers, but it also has a lot of similarity to hers. And so it's how is there room for both of them? That's a bigger issue. And so let's talk about the two different sides of this.
Okay.
So if he's the lower desire partner, let's play that scenario as a possibility, right?
Okay.
So the question I would have is, do you know the difference between your actual desire level and the desire that you've buried for a year of managing her pain? Did something shift to where your desire shifted and diminished because of her pain? And if it did, what's the difference in that of what it once was to what it is now?
Yeah. And if there's a discrepancy there.
And once you discover that, then the question becomes, and this is the more pointed question, what are you doing with it?
Yeah.
And are you willing to find out the differences between them? And then what do you do with it? Because this is where you start to cultivate the environment differently for yourself.
Yeah.
And you start to change the way you interact with things because you're heading straight towards some of the things that you've been reluctant to face.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of courage. Because I totally understand in the world in which we live, it's very easy to not face the things I don't want to deal with. Mm-hmm. But what's the cost of that?
Yeah.
If I don't?
Yeah, for sure.
And then the other side of this is, what if this is a man that's hiding as kindness, right?
What do you mean?
It's the idea of he's pulled way back out of the fear of hurting her. And then we call it kindness. I'm not wanting to elicit pain in her, which, I can understand that. But how do you still have a masculine presence, if you will? How do you still have a presence as a husband?
So is there a line there? If I'm doing this out of kindness for her, but that's ultimately not what she wants. She wants him to be there. She wants him to participate in this aspect of life together.
And let's use the scenario we used 2 weeks ago of, she wants something to ride. And I don't necessarily mean that physically as sexual beings.
Right. And we say ride because,
that's calling on her horse riding ability and professional horse history. Yes. So it's something that's not passive, because the stance in her map of what she's talking about of he succumbs to obligatory sex. Like he just goes through the motion. That's not something that's present. That's not something that's worth that's not something that in the long run is worth riding.
Well, and I guess one of the questions is ultimately is, am I trying to be that kind? Am I trying to save her from pain? Or am I trying to save myself from it? right? Is my kindness more about her and being kind for her, or is it really me just trying to keep my own anxieties low?
Right.
Because I'm scared of what will happen to her.
Right. And that's where you have a great growth opportunity if you're willing to actually confront that. I've had many clients that have been in similar situations where painful sex is a part of their history or their present. And it really comes down to each of them learning to better trust themselves and their spouse to handle themselves. Yeah. It's not my job to handle you if pain is a possibility. It's your job to let me know what's going on with you.
Yes.
And it's my job to lead where I'm hoping it'll go, with some kindness, but more importantly, with presence.
Yeah.
And being willing to adjust and shift. And so it's this element of, if he's got something, if he's not the lower desire spouse, he's just pulled way back because of fear or uncertainty. If he was to start to give something to ride, he would have a different presence coming into the marriage and into the day to day that she can bounce off of and adjust and identify according to.
Yeah.
Which is part of the dynamic of what differentiation does. Because we talk a lot about dialing at one side of just holding on to myself, steadying myself. But you do it in the context of a marriage. And sometimes when your presence is there, the context of the marriage makes holding on to yourself a whole lot easier because there's a different gauge. I mean, let me ask you a question, Pam. So what do you notice about me when I'm fully present and showing up versus when I'm gone careful or I've pulled back? And what's the actual difference you feel in our relationship according to my actual presence or withdrawn?
Well, I mean, there's a definite there's physical clues, right? Because if you're really present, there's eye contact, there's a better touch because it's maybe a firmer or more intent rather than kind of a lighter and passive and should I touch you here? Should I not touch you here? So there are some physical clues like that, but there's also I don't know, just a demeanor and like the language and how you.
What goes on with you in those moments?
Well, I'm more comfortable with the one that's actually present, right? The one that's actually
so you find yourself
making the contact,
settling down, being comfortable. I mean, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, for sure. It's just a more easy and comfortable connection.
Yeah.
And maybe the other one just doesn't even feel like connection at all, right? And so it's you walk away from that maybe feeling a little bit empty.
Yeah. Well, and we'll talk about this at length in the extended content today on the masculine feminine dynamic.
Yeah.
And make it some about this, but also just in general. But this is that element of there's the question for him isn't whether he's a lower desire or he's the man that's been hiding. The question for him actually is he willing to lean in to figure that out? Is he willing to be known regardless of what the answer is? Because that's a bringing a presence. That's a not being a passive horse in the framework we're using for these two episodes.
Yeah.
That's giving her something that she can lean against. She can work with alongside. She can understand herself in context of, because that's a huge component of marriage that is important. We don't spend a lot of time talking about it, that dynamic of, but we do take our shape according to each other. And that's a process of growth and development that's important and vital. So for him, it's about showing up, even if you don't know what it looks like yet.
Yeah.
It's showing up because that's the more adult move. That's the more leaning into this. So in the extended content, let's go deeper on this idea of the masculine feminine.
Perfect.
And we'll see.